This is BBC Newsline. I'm Declan Harvey. The headlines. Patients died because of urology failures at the Southern Health Trust. The scathing findings of a public inquiry. Jeffrey Donaldson has asked to give back his knighthood following his child abuse convictions. The civil service tells staff it is withdrawing from taking part in Pride events this summer. Later, we hear from the expert now tasked to tackle bad behaviour in our schools.
What we're hearing a lot from people in schools, leaders, principals, teachers, people who are child-facing, is that there is an increasing issue.
Almost all Northern Ireland's environmental targets are not on track. The UK's environment watchdog says urgent action is needed.
And tomorrow is set up to be the hottest day of the year so far, possibly climbing close to 30 degrees. I'll have the details shortly.
Patients died as a result of the poor care they received within the urology service at the Southern Health Trust. The final report from the public inquiry makes for damning reading. It highlights how serious harm was done to patients, and some people were exposed to avoidable risk. At the centre of all this is retired consultant Aidan O'Brien. Colleagues had raised concerns about his work over a number of years. He has been described in the report today as a doctor in difficulty who acted outside accepted practices and resisted change and also being challenged. It's been found there were risks to patient safety, and treatments were also delayed. Some whose cases were flagged as serious incidents later died. The report says managers at the Southern Trust failed to act on warning signs at the urology service, and repeatedly they missed opportunities to step in and address the concerns being raised about Aidan O'Brien. The report contains a series of recommendations, but many of them we have heard before in other reports. Our health correspondent Mary-Louise Connolly is standing by for us outside the inquiry headquarters in Belfast. This is, it must be said, another bad day, Mary-Louise, for the Southern Trust.
Indeed, Declan, and considering this is the second public inquiry report into health here in the past 7 days, well, some might say it's been a really bad week for the health service. Last week, the focus was on the Belfast Health Trust and that scathing report on Muckamore Abbey Hospital, which confirmed the abuse of vulnerable patients. Today, well, the light's being shone on the Southern Health Trust. And at the public inquiry held in these offices behind me here in Castlereagh, its inquiry's chair said that due to failings in patient care, some patients had died. Another public health inquiry in Northern Ireland. This time it involves patients in the Southern Health Trust. While over 1,000 patient records were recalled, there were 9 serious adverse incidents. That means an event that led or could have led to unintended or unexpected harm.
The SAIs that triggered this inquiry revealed significant patient harm, as did other cases the inquiry considered. Some of the patients died.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mary-Louise.
Afternoon, Christine. The chair of the inquiry told me there were failures from the very top and patients' concerns ignored.
The systems were such that nobody actually sat down with the patients and said, what is it that you're actually complaining about here?
The inquiry examined the work of one consultant, urologist Aidan O'Brien. It found many failings around his practice. That harm could have been prevented, including missed cancer diagnosis. Patients suffered serious harm, including failures in diagnosis and follow-up. There were repeated missed opportunities for the Trust to act on a doctor who was in difficulty. Risks weren't addressed, and Mr O'Brien's administration of his practice was at times unsafe.
I'm very, very sorry on behalf of the Trust as a corporate body.
Considering the critical report into cervical screening earlier this year and now this, I put it to the Chief Executive. Is the Southern Health Trust fit for purpose?
The Southern Health Trust is fit for purpose today. Bear in mind what the report also said, compliments about the Southern Health Trust in terms of the way in which it had cooperated with the inquiry itself and the learning and openness of its staff. It is fit for purpose today.
So why has Northern Ireland had a run of public health inquiries? Critics say learning and implementation of recommendations is far too slow. Also, there's a tendency to commission reviews after a crisis rather than identifying problems sooner. Also, political instability delays reform. So where does the buck stop?
I've spoken to Minister this morning and I've told him that he needs to step up to the plate and to make a declaration that patient safety has to be the core for everything in our health system.
And I absolutely agree with Christine Smith-Casey. Safety of patients and service users is absolutely the #1 priority.
Clearly, there's much work to be done. Mary-Louise Connolly, BBC Newsline.
Well, a short time ago, I had the opportunity to put some of those issues to the medical director of the Southern Trust, Dr. Stephen Austin.
It's really harrowing to hear the findings, but we're really grateful for the inquiry for giving us the expertise to help us with the learning going forward.
We are having a strikingly similar conversation to one we had right here last November. I think this is the third time I've spoken to you in your role at the Southern Trust about significant failures, governance failures, managerial failures. How many times are we going to have to do this?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to apologise to the patients who are involved in this issue. But what I would say to you is that a lot of these events actually happened around about the same time, and what we are discovering is that the governance at the times was not sufficient, and it's one of the bit of work we're doing is to actually make sure we address that, and we have made significant progress.
How?
There's new complaints procedures in, so the patient voice is heard more clearly, and we're making sure that learning is going into the system. And the inquiry chair, I think, referenced that as well in the inquiry report today.
The inquiry chair also referenced today deaths. So can we be clear about that? Have patients died as a result of these failures in urology services?
Well, what the inquiry was not set up to investigate those matters, but what we do know is that there was delays in treatment, delays in diagnosis of patients, and ultimately that does lead to, in some cases, potentially premature deaths. So yes, we do appreciate that and we do apologise for that. And we weren't good enough at picking up the signals along the way to address those matters.
Are those deaths at the door of consultant Aidan O'Brien?
Well, I think it's not as simple as that, because I think there's a whole process about how we manage concerns, and it's a much more complex picture than just one individual, because the whole system is involved about treating those patients.
Did it take this inquiry to alert you as medical director that people had died as a result of the failures within the urology services?
You already mentioned there had been some serious adverse incidents, so we did have some learning from that already come through to improve the system already, so we did know about those, yes.
Aidan O'Brien has retired. What should happen to him?
Well, I know there's separate processes at present with the General Medical Council, so I wouldn't like to comment on that.
What should happen to your staff who have been called out for systemic failures, repeated missed opportunities, weak systems?
What the inquiry has noted is that there's a willingness to learn, and actually learning has already been put into the system. The inquiry specifically mentioned that we had taken advice of independent experts in our learning, and we didn't wait for the inquiry to publish its findings.
But that is a very similar answer to when we spoke around the smear tests last November. You seem very disinclined to sack people.
Well, I think what's the most important thing, and I think the inquiry chair, Christine Smith, did mention this, that it's most important that we move towards a system that learns from failures that have happened and puts those changes in place, and not to focus on blame.
Back in 2017, the similar sentiments were being echoed. Oh, something's wrong here, we're really going to get to grips with it. And a whole system was set in place, supervision, all this stuff, and it still failed. So how can the trust be trusted to get its house in order?
Well, what we learned from the inquiry is, in fact, that although there were systems in place, they weren't followed fully. There wasn't the appropriate attention to detail to follow through in actions going forward. Today, there's changes in that. We don't do that further. What we do now is we follow through in the actions and we address concerns promptly, and focusing on patient safety is a prime concern.
How do we hold you to account on this? What's the metric for success? Just an absence of future inquiries?
No, absolutely not. No, I think what we want to see is a real focus on patient safety going forward, and the Trust is very open and content to make sure that the recommendations are implemented, and we were happy to have that externally scrutinised as part of our improvement project.
But do you have that in place? Is that in place?
Well, that's what we're going to look for.
So it's still not in place?
Well, we do have external oversight from the Department of Health, but we're quite happy to have others come in and look at to make sure we're implementing and provide that assurance to the public.
Do you have any final thoughts for the people, the 1,000 or so people who were caught up in this?
Well, as a doctor, it does worry me that patients did come to harm and had delayed treatments.
As well, it should.
As it should. But I think what we need to make sure is that there's a real change going forward, and certainly I'm committed with my colleagues to make sure that that is the case.
Well, thanks to Dr. Stephen Austin. Now, following his conviction on Monday and the commentary that has followed it, we have an update on Jeffrey Donaldson this evening. Let's speak to our political correspondent, Gareth Gordon. What have we heard?
Well, Declan, you know that two of the most asked questions when the Donaldson verdicts were delivered on Monday were how long will he get in jail and when will he lose his knighthood? Now, we won't know about the sentence until later this year, but on the knighthood this afternoon, he effectively jumped before he was pushed. The move was confirmed in a statement from his solicitor, John McBurney, and it read, I have this afternoon issued a letter signed by Jeffrey Donaldson to the Cabinet Office indicating a request to renounce and forfeit his knighthood. Then there's the question of his membership of the Privy Council. That, of course, is the formal constitutional body which advises the King on official matters of state and approves legislation. Another brief statement in regard to that. I have this afternoon issued a letter signed by Jeffrey Donaldson to the Privy Council Office, tendering his resignation from the Privy Council with immediate effect. So, from his cell in Maghaberry Prison, Jeffrey Donaldson has decided to give up his knighthood and his Privy Council membership before being stripped of both, as he inevitably would have had.
OK, Gareth, thank you very much for that update. Gareth Gordon. Well, staying on a political theme in a sense, because despite its attendance in previous years, the Northern Ireland Civil Service has said it will not formally take part in Pride events this summer. Its head, Jane Brady, who herself has been seen waving a rainbow flag as part of previous marches, has told staff the context around Pride has changed. Our political reporter, Brendan Hughes, has more on this.
The Civil Service is once again looking forward to taking part in Belfast Pride.
Not anymore. This was the head of the Civil Service 3 years ago.
And taking part in Pride is one way in which we can show our commitment to creating a workplace culture that celebrates diversity and values inclusion.
Now Jane Brady and other senior officials have changed tack. In an internal message, staff were told in the current legal and case law context, the Civil Service is not in a position to participate in Pride events this year in an official capacity, but this does not reflect any wider change in our commitment to LGBTQ+ workplace inclusion. For Stormont's most prominent gay politician, the decision is disappointing.
I understand the context to it, but obviously that's a decision for the Civil Service around it. I'm very disappointed by it, but I'll be there. I'll be there with so many other people and we stand together in support of LGBT people in Northern Ireland.
That context includes political divisions on transgender issues and the withdrawal of other public bodies in previous years, including the PSNI. As for the Equality Commission...
So I assume that you have issued a similar directive to the Equality Commission and to members of your staff that it would be highly inappropriate for them to be involved in an official capacity at any forthcoming Pride event.
We do not get involved in political activism, nor should any of our staff be doing that either.
The Civil Service says its commitment to LGBT staff has not changed, unlike its policy on this summer's Pride parades. Brendan Hughes, BBC Newsline.
The coroner at the Noah Donohoe inquest is due to begin his summing up to the jury tomorrow. Noah disappeared and died in North Belfast just over 6 years ago on the 21st of June 2020. Kevin Sharkey has the latest.
The inquest into Noah's death began at the end of January. The coroner's charge, or summing up, is the final stage before the jury is sent out to consider a verdict. Addressing the jury, Mr. Justice Rooney said his charge is unlikely to be completed tomorrow. But addressing the jury and the legal representatives, he said, "We're running out of time. We have to get the inquest finished." The jury at this inquest consists of 8 men and 2 women. So, after 5 months of hearings, a significant day tomorrow as this inquest draws towards a conclusion. Kevin Sharkey, BBC Newsline at the Coroner's Court in Belfast.
Well, that's tomorrow, but 10 years ago today, we woke up to the news that the UK had voted to leave the EU. In the Brexit negotiations that followed, the trickiest issue became how to keep a free-flowing border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. Ultimately, the UK government agreed that the most practical way was for Northern Ireland to stay in the EU's single market for goods. That meant a new trade border was put into the Irish Sea with checks, controls and paperwork required for goods coming in from other parts of the UK. It took 5 years for those arrangements to be fully implemented. They, of course, became known as the Windsor Framework, and it's had a profound impact on our politics. And as our economics editor, John Campbell, reports, some continue to see it as a challenge, whereas others consider it an opportunity.
This is the Irish Sea border in physical form, a new facility at Larne Harbour built by the UK government. It's here that goods from Great Britain can be checked to make sure they're allowed to be sold in Northern Ireland. But it's away from the frontier, inside businesses like this garden centre, that our Brexit deal has been a real challenge. Over the last 5 years, John Shannon has faced a thicket of bureaucracy as he's tried to maintain relations with his suppliers in GB.
Pre-Brexit, I was able to buy a lot of plant material in from the leading nurseries in England with no difficulty at all. Haulage was no difficulty. As soon as Brexit came in, it stopped completely. A series of supplementary deals between the EU and the UK have softened some of the hardest edges of the sea border. Traders like John have also adapted. He's sourcing more products from across the frictionless land border, but he says there's more to do. The current form of our Brexit deal, the Windsor Framework, was negotiated by Rishi Sunak in 2023. He came to the Coca-Cola factory near Lisburn to talk up that deal, emphasising that it gives manufacturers here better access to the EU market than rivals in other parts of the UK.
Northern Ireland is in the unbelievably special position, unique position in the entire world, European continent, in having privileged access, not just to the UK home market, which is enormous, 5th biggest in the world, but also the European Union single market. Nowhere else does that exist.
In the Mid-Ulster manufacturing heartland, that advantage is real. The boss here says they had to suffer through the early stages of Brexit, but they now have an edge over GB suppliers.
Nothing has really changed for us when we're selling parts across the world, including the EU, including GB. We send the product out, we send whatever paperwork, and the parts turn up. When I compare that to what would have been my competition in GB, they effectively were on a level playing field with me, and now they have to go through the processes of customs documentations, longer shipping, brokers' fees. It's just another hurdle for what would have been my competition.
Since Brexit, the local manufacturing sector has performed a bit better than the UK average, particularly over the last year. But there hasn't been the sort of world-beating manufacturing boom that Rishi Sunak might have been hoping for. In fact, the most consistent growth in our economy over the last decade has been in business services like accountancy and law. These are not covered by the Windsor Framework, which helps show that economic performance is rarely about just one thing. But the Economy Minister says there is growing evidence that dual market access is having a real effect.
If you look at the point in time where the Windsor Framework came into effect, so end of March 2023, since then our exports have increased significantly, while in Britain they have fallen. And when you look at the exports to the EU specifically, ours have risen by over 10%, while in Britain they have fallen by over 16%.
The UK government is hoping to do a new deal with the EU later this year, which would reduce the impact of the sea border, which illustrates how 10 years on, Brexit continues to be a process rather than a one-off event. John Campbell, BBC Newsline.
Well, you'll find lots more coverage and analysis of Brexit 10 years on across the BBC. Right now, though, it is just after 10 to 7. This is BBC Newsline. A word about what's online this evening. Northern Ireland has a higher than average number of people not in or looking for work. Now, the former UK Health Minister Alan Milburn has been appointed as chairman of a new Stormont Commission, which will try to get more people into work where possible. All the details on our website, BBC News NI online. You'll also find it on the BBC News app. Enough planning. It's time to start delivering. That is the message given today to ministers if they are to show they are serious about improving our environment. The Office for Environmental Protection has published its first assessment of how much progress the Executive has made with its own Environmental Improvement Plan. Have a look at this. On reaching net zero greenhouse gases, that's about reducing emissions by adapting to changes in our climate, the Executive has been judged to be off track. There is some good news about work to improve air quality. That process was considered to be partially on track, but it's not expected to stay that way. Also gone off track are attempts to improve water quality. The same was judged of plans to protect nature, the land and our seas. Off track. And the assessment said Lough Neagh has become a beacon for the urgent need for action. Well, our agriculture and environment correspondent Louise Cullen is on the shores of Lough Neagh for us this evening. What's your read of this, Louise? Good evening.
Good evening, Declan. Well, really, it feels like Groundhog Day in environment terms, does it? Yet another stark assessment of our failures on this front. But the OEP does recognise that the Environmental Improvement Plan is a good plan. It has potential, but that potential remains unfulfilled largely across the board. As you say, this lake behind me, it says, is a beacon for the consequences of not rising to these challenges. And top of its list of 3 key areas to prioritise is effectively tackling nutrient pollution from both agriculture and wastewater, which is the main driver of the crisis here. Now, while the Environmental Improvement Plan is a cross-cutting one approved by the Executive, earlier the Minister told me that it's at that same Executive table where the actions needed are being frustrated.
I'm very frustrated that my desire to have stronger regulation and enforcement of that sewage pollution is now being impeded by the Executive. The Executive meets tomorrow and there's no good reason why those papers can't be on the agenda for decision. There is 2 papers there where I'm seeking to end the byball that's wrongly been afforded to NI Water, but also to make a special designation in relation to Belfast Lough. They need to be agreed. We need to have stronger regulation and enforcement of wastewater. That pollution that's occurring is wrong.
Well, the OEP also recommends prioritising the move to a circular economy where our resources are kept in circulation and in use for much longer. And it says we must prioritise nature recovery for the benefit of future generations. As for this beacon of environmental challenge behind me, well, the stormier weather this year means that we haven't yet seen large-scale algal blooms as we have in previous summers. But I can tell you tonight, there is algae in this lake. You can see it floating, some little clumps of it, and you can see the green spores as well. Some settled weather is all it will take for that to resurface. The Lough Neagh Action Plan is next in line for the OEP to look at. We'll see what the Executive has done then.
Yeah, and as if to make a point of how beautiful nature is, those 2 ducks making an appearance over your left shoulder as well, Louise. An opportunity to be on telly. Thank you very much for that. Well, bad behaviour in our classrooms is an increasing issue, and it's now time it was addressed. That is according to Northern Ireland's new school behaviour SAR. His name is Tom Bennett. Having carried out a similar role in England, he's now been appointed by our Education Minister Paul Givan and says schools need to be rigorous about pupils' behaviour. Our education correspondent Robbie Meredith has more on this.
This is the man tasked with improving behaviour in schools here. A problem Tom Bennett says is getting worse.
Some people would attribute it to things like social media, COVID, increasing complexities of needs, greater prevalence of special educational needs and so on. That's something I want to try to get to the bottom of. But what we're hearing a lot from people in schools, leaders, principals, teachers, people who are child facing, is that there is